Civil War, 1861 through 1865, by Lexi Petty. When Europeans started coming to North America, forms of slavery had seemed to be a necessity. First, it was indentured servants who worked up to 7 years as a slave in exchange for passage to the New World. The problem was, when they had worked off their passage, they had no money, no lands, and no means to obtain it. This led to a decline in willing indentured servants and opened a door to slaves being brought to North America. Slaves were cheap, relatively disposable, and they stayed until they died or their owners sold them. The need for indentured servants disappeared, and the need for slaves dramatically increased. As time went on, the North weaned away from the use of slaves due to the multiple industrial revolutions and the developments in technology, but the South's plantations and Southern lifestyles needed slaves to continue functioning. The expansion westward opened new land that slave states needed to keep power in the government while the northern states wanted to gain power and end slavery. When the United States started moving into the areas obtained by the Louisiana Purchase, the Missouri wanted to enter as a slave state. This caused an uproar in the North because it would give slavery the upper hand in Congress and the Senate. To put an end to this, they only brought Missouri into the Union under the condition that Maine joined as a free state. This was called the Missouri Compromise, also known as the Compromise of 1820. It also prohibited slavery anywhere north of the parallel 3630 line. This subdued the South for a while, but the peace did not last for long. Maine immediately gave voting rights to all male citizens, including blacks. This was followed by in 1821, New York giving all free blacks the right to vote as well. 6 years later, in 1827, slavery was prohibited in the state of New York. In 1829, Georgia made it illegal to educate slaves in hopes that they would make them unaware of their conditions and keep them from revolting. The next year, the Underground Railroad was established, which was a network of secret routes and safe houses used by the 19th century slaves to escape to the free states in Canada. In 1835, Texas declared independence from Mexico and applied for statehood. Both the Democratic Party and the Whig Party were against the annexation of Texas as a slave state due to the fear that the large state would split into multiple slave states and give slavery the upper hand. Despite this fear, on December 29, 1845, Texas joined the Union as a slave state under the Tyler-Texas Treaty. In 1846, the U.S. went to war with Mexico, and by 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed and officially ended the war. The United States had paid $15 million to Mexico, but acquired New Mexico Territory and California. The same year, the U.S. organized Oregon as a territory as well. The Compromise of 1850 was a package of 5 bills which diffused the 4-year argument between the North and the South caused by the introduction of new territories obtained by the Mexican-American War. Under this compromise, California entered the Union as a free state. Slave trade was banned in Washington, D.C., but the fugitive slave law, which states if a runaway slave is found in the North, must be sent back to its master in the South, was strengthened. Written by Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin was about the horrors of slave life in the South. The publication of this book made Southern states very angry at the North and was a main cause of the Civil War. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed in 1854, creating the territories of Kansas and Nebraska and granting them popular sovereignty, or the ability to vote whether to be a slave or free state, to all the white males in the territories. The senator of Illinois hoped this would keep arguments over slavery in the new territory subdued, but the repealing of the Missouri Compromise proved to be a bad idea. There was an outpour in Kansas of people wanting both free state and a slave state, resulting in multiple bloody confrontations and a small civil war, which became known as Bleeding Kansas. In 1856, a raid in Kansas, led by John Brown, killed 5 slavery supporters. The South saw this as the North making an obvious attempt to abolish slavery. In 1859, John Brown led a raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He led an armed slave revolt and attacked the U.S. arsenal. With only 20 men at his side, 3 being his sons, they lost. The people on John's side were all killed except for him, but he was later executed. The last straw for the South was the election of 1860. Despite having no votes in the South, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States on November 6th. Because of this, on December 20th, South Carolina seceded from the Union. From January 9th to February 1st in 1861, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas also seceded. On March 4th, 1861, Lincoln was inaugurated. On April 12th, Fort Sumter, a federal fort off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, was attacked by Confederate soldiers. They opened fire on the northern fort with the first shots and the beginning of the Civil War. 5 days later, Virginia seceded from the Union. Within 5 weeks, Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee seceded as well. The 4 border states that did not secede were Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. West Virginia soon split from Virginia to become the 5th border state and prevent from leaving the Union. On April 19th, President Lincoln ordered a blockade on all southern ports. Then the next day, Robert E. Lee resigned from his commission in the U.S. Army and offered his services to Virginia. This was because his entire family lived there. On July 21st, the Union Army under General Irving Dowell was defeated at the First Battle of Bull Run. Confederate soldiers withstood the Union's attacks and the Union soldiers fell back to Washington. On April 6, 1862, Confederate soldiers launched a surprise attack on General Ulysses S. Grant's army at Shiloh, Tennessee. The Union troops were defeated. On August 29th, 75,000 Union soldiers under General John Pope were defeated by 55,000 Confederates under General Stonewall Jackson at the Second Battle of Bull Run. General John Pope was then relieved of his position directly by President Lincoln. September 17th, also known as the bloodiest day in U.S. military history, General Robert E. Lee and the Confederate armies are stopped at Antietam in Maryland by McClellan and the Union forces that heavily outweighed their own. Lee and his remaining forces withdrew to Virginia. The Battle of Fredericksburg took place on December 13th in Virginia between General Lee and the Union Army of Potomac. The Union Army suffered a costly defeat with 12,653 dead. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the final Emancipation Proclamation that freed all the slaves held in the Confederate States. The Battle of Chancellorsville occurred on May 1st, where the Union Army under General Hooker was defeated by Lee's much smaller forces. On July 1st, the tide of the war turns against the South as the Confederates are defeated at the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. The Battle of Vicksburg happened 3 days later, on July 4th, as the last Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi River surrenders to General Grant after a 6-week siege. On September 19th, Union soldiers were defeated by the Confederate Army at the Battle of Chickamauga, leaving the Union Army stranded in Chattanooga, Tennessee, after the Confederate siege. The siege will end on November 23rd, when the Union soldiers avenge their previous loss to the Confederate Army and defeat them while chanting the word Chickamauga. At Cold Harbor, on June 3, 1864, a very costly mistake led to the deaths of 7,000 Confederate soldiers in 20 minutes during an offensive attack against the Southern Army. On November 15, 1864, after destroying Atlanta's warehouses and railroad facilities, Sherman began his march to the sea. By December 21st, Sherman made it to Savannah, Georgia, leaving a 300-mile path of destruction. Sherman then telegraphs Lincoln, offering him Savannah as a Christmas present. On March 25, 1865, it was the last offensive battle for Lee's army that began with an attack on the center of Grant's forces at Petersburg. 4 hours later, the attack is broken. On April 2nd, Grant's forces begin a general advance and break through Lee's lines at Petersburg. Union forces enter and raise the American flag. On April 9th, General Robert E. Lee surrenders his Confederate army to General Ulysses S. Grant at the village of Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. On April 14th, President Lincoln and his wife attend the play Our American Cousin to celebrate the end of the war. During the third act of the play, John Wilkes Booth shoots the president in the head. He died the next day. On May 4th, he is laid to rest in Oak Ridge Cemetery outside of Springfield, Illinois.